So good afternoon and welcome to Building Future Diverse Tech Talent and Careers. I'm Lauren Jones, Executive Vice President of the Massachusetts Business Roundtable and member of the Boston Private Industry Council's Board of Directors. The Roundtable is excited to partner with the Boston Private Industry Council to deliver today's event. Both the Roundtable and the PIC are also glad to be part of events happening all week across the state, thanks to regional STEM networks convening students, educators, government, nonprofit, and business leaders to celebrate science, technology, engineering, and math education and careers in Massachusetts. In case you didn't know, Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Pulit kicked off STEM Week yesterday. So what sparked someone's interest in tech? We have a great panel today to help answer this question for you and share the various paths leaders in tech have taken both in education and in their careers. This is also being recorded, and we look forward to sharing this even broadly beyond today's audience. But for those tuning in, the teachers and students, we'd like to hear from you. So please make sure to share questions in the chat and share what school you are also from. So to kick things off, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Gary Evee. Gary is the founder and CEO of Evee Security Consulting. So please, Gary, take it away.
Thank you, Lauren, for the introduction. Again, thank you, Lauren and Bruce and the entire PIC organization for convening this panel. So good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our panel on building a future diverse tech talent and careers. I'm Gary Evee, as Lauren mentioned. I happen to be the CEO and founder of Evee Security Consulting, Boston-based cybersecurity company here in the Massachusetts area. I think today's session is guaranteed to be an insightful event for anyone that is contemplating a career in technology. So whether or not you've already decided or you're undecided, I think we have three amazing panelists that will share their personal journeys about technology, how they arrived at where they are today. One of the challenges that I think that we often find when we're in high school is you're not quite sure whether or not what career that you should potentially pursue. In the technology space, there's lots of questions around what qualifications or experiences do I need. I don't know what the roles are that are potentially out there that are available to me. I don't have anyone that I can potentially talk to or help me understand what's possible. And if I look at my own personal experience, I very much went through that when I was in high school. I studied coding in high school. I had an opportunity. I went to Boston Line Academy, so I am a Boston public school student, and eventually went on to college at Hampton University and back here in Boston, where I worked for a tech company for a number of years. But I did not have a lot of the questions that posed here. I did not have anyone that I could reach out to answer those questions for me. So I happened to stumble into the tech space, and I'm happy that I did. I've been in the technology space for over 25 years. And so I understand the challenges that come with choosing a career. And so I think today's discussion would hopefully help you understand the art of what's possible in this particular space. So we want you to know that there's a myriad of different opportunities that are out there. And then there are folks that look like you and I that work in this exciting space. So before we get started, I will share with you just one or two slides that just talk a little bit about sort of the opportunities that are out there, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. So if we kind of think about the technology sector today, there are over 12 million people that are working currently in the technology space. The number of job opportunities continue to grow year over year. This year alone, we will add close to 250,000 jobs in the technology space. it's having an enormous impact on the economic output of the U.S. economy. It makes up about 10% of the overall U.S. economy for about $2 trillion. If you look at the salaries and the wages in this space, it is 2 times higher than the average wage or salary for the average American. We happen to live in a state, as Lauren mentioned earlier, the governor just sort of kicked off Cybersecurity Month, and we live in a state that I consider to be the best of the best when it comes to innovation and technology. And so we're number 1 in terms of the number of STEM graduates and those with professional degrees. We have over 1 million employees that are currently working in what we call this innovation economy. And so we are growing here in Massachusetts in terms of the opportunities in career faster than any other state in the US. And so it is an exciting time not only to be in the technology sector, but it's also an exciting time to be living here in Massachusetts because of all the opportunities that exist in this great state. If we look at the jobs that are currently available today, these are some of the jobs that are currently available. But it's not limited to just these jobs that you see here. These are the most in-demand jobs, and you'll see some of the salaries that are available. So whether you're a security professional, you want to work in the security space, you want to be a system analyst, you want to work in help desk. These are some of the different jobs and the opportunities that exist for someone that is pursuing. And you can see here that the wages, the salaries for those that are working in that space is significantly higher, right, than as I mentioned earlier, the median, and that's for the state of Massachusetts, right? So you'll see here that the median tech wage is about $97,000. The different industries, we've got folks in research and development. We'll see folks in manufacturing and software, and then we have growing bio and life sciences sector as well, right? And so you'll see here in our bio and life sciences, this is an area that has been growing, at a rate that's significantly higher than the rest of the country. But we do have some of the largest biotech companies located here. So folks like Takeda and Biogen, and we'll hear from, we've got someone from Vertex here with us today that will talk a bit about working in this space. But this is, again, just an exciting space. We're filled with opportunities. And so we're excited, to be able to share with you, again, a little bit about the opportunities that are out there and answer any questions that you may have about pursuing career opportunities there. So having said that, let's make a sort of a quick transition here. I have the pleasure here of introducing Kathy Kountze from DentaQuest. She is the Chief Information Officer, and she will actually provide us with some opening remarks. And so we're excited to have Kathy join and be part of this outstanding panel. So Kathy, I will turn it over to you at this time.
Great. Thanks so much, Gary. I appreciate the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. As Gary mentioned, today we'll be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is career in STEM. And what I really hope you all take away from this discussion is an understanding, as Gary has mentioned, of some of the many different ways that you can have a career in STEM. So as Gary said, I have 25 years working in the IT industry. I've spent the last 13 of those as a CIO. Have built a career in technology. I am officially the T in STEM. And when I started off in technology a long time ago, Many of the IT jobs were either in coding, hardware, and desktop support, networking, things like that. And you really needed to have a really deep, deep insight into technology. You needed to be deep in IT work, have a formal, in most cases, have a formal background, like a college degree in technology. And to be really good, you needed a lot of hands-on experience with technology because it was very customized and proprietary. So now fast forward to today, and the IT jobs, they look very different. And you still have those roles that I mentioned, developers, hardware experts, and they're still very important. But today, you will also find IT roles like project managers who run IT projects, and cybersecurity experts, as you saw on one of the slides, who protect companies, and IT architects who develop and build whole technology ecosystems. You have IT data experts and business analysts and testers and cloud experts. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And because technology has really become, in my opinion, more people-friendly and easier to learn, and because the average person uses so much technology every day, the formal background, the years of hands-on experience is really no longer needed for you to have a career in IT. I have found personally that if you come with a high level of energy, a willingness to continuously learn, and an excitement about how technology works in the world today, you will probably do very well pursuing an IT career. And with so much variety now in the IT field, it's easy to find something that you also will enjoy very much doing every day. And I suspect that the same variety and options exist with some of the other STEM careers as well today. So I really hope you enjoy all the conversations today and leave excited to learn more about STEM careers and potentially pursuing a career in these really critical, fun, important areas. And with that, Gary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Kathy, for those opening remarks. Kathy, I am going to ask you to join our illustrious panel, Paris Chandler and Sarah Pulit. So thank you again for those opening remarks. So Kathy, let's kind of start with you. I'll start with you. And so you've had this 25-year career, right, in this space. Talk a little bit about your first job, your first role, right, and what that was like, in this space.
So my first role, I fell into technology, as many people do. I actually graduated with an actuarial math degree and quickly decided I didn't want to be an actuary. So I started off from the beginning after trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. Anyways, I ended up at ADP as a customer service rep, and they were looking for people to volunteer to start launching their PC payroll, which is kind of funny because thinking of doing the payroll any other way but on a PC is almost unheard of these days, but that kind of dates me. And I volunteered. I really wanted to get off the phone, so I decided to pursue, whatever they were trying to do with that. And that's where I really I found my love for computers. I had really not worked with them very much prior to that, and quickly decided to go back and get my master's in computer science because I now needed to fill up the white space on my resume with everything and anything related to technology. So that was really my first job in computers, and launched the rest of what I've been doing for the last 20 years in IT. The
rest is history. Okay, awesome. So I'll turn it over to, I'll go to Sarah and Paris. Sarah and Paris, I'll both ask you if you can take just a few minutes here. Love to make sure the audience know who you are, what company you work for, and just kind of talk a little bit about your current jobs and kind of what you do. So Paris, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Sarah. So just a little bit about, if you can just share again a little bit about the company you work for, the role that you're currently in.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Paris. I'm founder and CEO of Black Tech Pipeline. Black Tech Pipeline is a service-based platform where we connect Black technologists to job opportunities with companies that are truly pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have a job board, and then we also have a recruitment service.
Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm a principal research scientist at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, which is a biotech pharma company that works to create transformative medicines for serious diseases that have high unmet need. So we have several disease programs ongoing, probably best known for one in cystic fibrosis, where we have a couple of treatments on the market already, but are working in a number of spaces, including sickle cell disease.
Awesome. Awesome. So those are all, phenomenal spaces. Paris, congratulations again. So for those of you that are listening, we congratulated Paris earlier for her receiving or being named one of the 50 most powerful, Paris, is that true, in Boston, right? For the work that she's doing to diversify the tech pipeline. So Paris, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's amazing work. It's having an enormous impact, obviously, on trying to diversify, I think, this, this terrific space. So Paris, let's kind of talk a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you first arrived in this space, right? And then taking on the mantle of trying to diversify. Why did you feel that that was sort of an important space for you?
Yeah, so I entered tech, I feel, I guess, kind of late. I don't know if late really counts, but in 2017, I did a boot camp called Resilient Coders, which caters to people of color in underserved communities, and they teach them how to code. So I graduated from Resilient Coders, and that's how I got into tech. From there, I got an internship at an ad agency in Boston, where I was on the tech team. From there, I got my first job as a software engineer and so on. And in not only at that internship, but at every other company I worked for, I was always the only Black person on the tech team and in the entire company. And that was really new for me because I came from jobs and places where I was always surrounded by people who look like me. So now that I was entering these new spaces, I didn't know how to adapt or adjust or be myself. And it was very uncomfortable. And I had so many different experiences because of that. And so I got onto Twitter, which is a very public platform. And that's where I discovered a really small community of Black technologists. And that's where I was like, oh, wow, there are people who look like me in this industry. I just had to get online to see them. From there, I created this community called Black Tech Twitter, which is just a community of Black technologists. And I had the opportunity to start recruiting them into companies. And I wanted to do that because I knew what it was like to be the only one, in a company who looked like me. And I wanted to see more people within the Black community in these spaces, not just because it's less lonely, but because it's a game changer in terms of equity and building generational wealth. And so that's why I took it on, and I'm really dedicated and passionate about this work, and not just so much about diversifying the industry, but also making sure that people understand the importance of equity and inclusion and retaining people from these underserved communities.
Outstanding. So Paris, just before I go to Sarah here for a second. So you actually started at Resilient Coders. Did you always know that you wanted to kind of move into this space, or?
No, tech was never a passion of mine. I went to school in New York to be a screenwriter. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles to try and become an actress. And obviously none of that worked, but I got into tech. It started off because of finances. And also I was in the group that was being sort of left behind because of technology. I was a wax specialist for 3 years, and I learned about coding in 2016, which is, again, I feel like that's really late to learn that this thing exists. And when I learned what it was and how technology is progressing, I realized that my job as a wax specialist was you know, it was kind of being replaced by machines because you have laser hair removal. You know, laser hair removal is permanent. And so no one has to get waxed after that. And so when I was like, okay, like I can be targeted, I really can be replaced by machines. That's when I was like, okay, what is coding? That's what I keep hearing about. Obama kept talking about coding, coding, coding. I'm like, what is that? And that's when I did my research and I learned about resilient coders, and I dropped everything to dive right into learning how to program and, you know, becoming a software engineer.
Awesome. That's an amazing story. That's an amazing journey. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we can all be replaced by technology. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, right? But you know, that's interesting. So Sarah, let's talk about the work that you're doing in Vertex research. Amazing. We thank you. We understand how important research is. We're obviously living in the midst of a pandemic, and the work that's happening in this space is obviously important as we've come to realize. So Sarah, can you talk a little bit about your job? Talk a little about what your day-to-day, what you do on a day-to-day basis at Vertex.
Definitely. So I'm what's called a computational biologist, which means that I use computers and programming to analyze biological data sets. So on a day-to-day, what that might mean is I work very closely with people who work in the lab and do, you know, pipetting and loads of fancy stuff that I cannot do. I worked for one summer in a lab when I was, I don't know, 18 or 19, and discovered very quickly that I didn't like it. Luckily, other people do and are much better at it than I am. And so I work very closely with them to design experiments to help us understand a disease, understand what causes disease, and then try and understand, well, what can we do to potentially halt or reverse that disease? And those experiments often generate lots of genomic data. So we all have genomes. They're kind of like the user manual for how we get put together, essentially. So, you know, you buy a new couch, comes with a whole packet, how to put it together. That's what our genome does for us. And when that genomic data gets generated from these experiments, I'm the one who analyzes it. So all of those A's, C's, G's, and T's that appear in our genome, they actually create these massive data sets. So billions and billions of letters, and often, you know, hundreds of samples that we generate. So you can imagine, you know, an Excel spreadsheet with millions of columns and millions of rows. You need powerful computers to work through all that data and identify patterns that we need to recognize in order to understand how these diseases work. So from a very high level, that's sort of what I do is I work with our biologists to design those experiments and then to analyze the massive amounts of data that get generated as we run the experiments.
Awesome, awesome. So talk a little bit about, like, what's the most challenging part of kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think probably, I mean, they're challenges I enjoy. So one is I think you'll find in tech, and maybe Kathy and Paris have had this experience, or Gary, you as well, that we all speak kind of very specific languages because we have a specialization that we know very well. So I, for example, studied genetics and math. So there's a certain language that's happening in my head that I understand quite easily. But then I might talk to a chemist or an engineer who doesn't speak exactly that same language. So one of the challenges that I have day to day is sort of translating what I understand and what I'm working on to someone who's, you know, incredibly clever, but comes from a different space and doesn't necessarily understand what it is that I'm doing. And so we're constantly looking for those bridges or places where we can sort of communicate in the same place and understand what each of the other is doing, and bridging that sort of communication gap. That's a challenge that we definitely have day to day.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. So Kathy, kind of brings back a little bit to you, right? So we talked a little bit about you know, the role that you have as CIO, right? It's a challenging one, and one of the things that I imagine you're facing is that you're dealing with information that's always fast moving, and communication, effective communication skills is one of the things that's really important to have. And so you've kind of talked through a little bit of, you know, when you're looking to hire, when you're looking to bring somebody into your organization, right? What are the types of things that you're looking for? What are the types of skills that you tend to look for in someone?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so first, before I answer that, I just have to say to Paris, because I may not see her again for a while, is my daughter and her had parallel lives because my daughter graduated just performing arts, wanted to be an actress on Broadway, and is now in IT. So I just had to say that.
Oh, that's so cool.
They're parallel lives. And it was
I love
around the same time that she discovered, oh, what is this IT thing, even though her mother was a CIO. So anyways, what I look for is, I talk about it all the time. So a lot, I love to reach out and work with, as Lauren knows very well, with folks who are interested in getting into IT and again, may not have all the credentials that you would typically see for someone going in IT. And what I've always looked for and have found the biggest success when I was at Eversource, was able to bring in some great apprentices, and the level of energy was always just over the top. That they came in with just such a passion around, I really want to pursue a career in IT. In a lot of cases, it was because they were interested, because they knew all the stats that were talked about today, how it could, kind of change their economic situation, and how they knew it was leveraged in everything that people do every day. So when they come in with that kind of energy and then this hitting the ground running and just wanting to learn more and more every day. A few times I had to even tell them when they come into my office, you're like, just slow down. I mean, you've done 3 things, you've learned 3 things and done really well. I can't keep up with you. So, having that combination, I've seen those folks, just soar in their careers. And I was, had I was so lucky and fortunate to be able to give them full-time jobs and see them just thrive from their energy, their ability to learn so quickly. They just had natural aptitude to learn. And so I look for that a lot more. I have worked with people, I have had to let people go who came in literally with credentials from Ivy League schools, who were not able to translate that to good deliverables, or the ability to listen, or the ability to communicate effectively, and we're not successful. So I don't think, those are the things you need to find someone who's going to be strong in this field. I think you need to find the right soft skills and the right attitude first. And I think everything else will be learned.
Awesome. And I think, oftentimes when I talk to students and folks that are looking to get into the space, they think that credentials is the most important thing to getting into the space. And I often say, absolutely not. I think it's all the things that you cited, being inquisitive, having high energy, the soft skills, those are all important ingredients for someone that to be successful, right, in this particular space. So that's fantastic. So Paris, you're on the pipeline side, right? You're talking to companies, right, and you're helping place folks in exciting careers in technology. What are some of the roles and different things that you're finding companies are looking for? What are you seeing in terms of the opportunities and the roles that are out there?
Yeah, I want to say mainly are software engineers, data analysts, tech recruiters, designers. I think those are and project managers and product owners. So those are sort of like the top ones right now. And I've also seen digital marketers.
Mm-hmm.
So for project managers and maybe project managers and digital marketers, some people didn't consider that sort of like a tech role, but it is. So I think a lot of people sort of restrict technology to, being a technologist to being a software engineer, but there are so many other roles where you have to work with technology in order for that product to progress or keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing about that, what I see from a lot of candidates or people just entering this space is that they think they have to also be a software engineer to work in tech, or work at a tech company to work in tech. And that's also not true. You could, I say this all the time, especially because I'm a makeup lover, you could work at Fenty Beauty as a project manager, as a digital marketer, at the end of the day, you still need to use technology. I don't know which companies aren't using technology in order to stay relevant and stay up to date and reach new customers and just, kind of keep up with the times. This all revolves around technology. You're still considered a technologist.
Yeah, absolutely. And well said, Paris. And again, I do look back at just my own journey, and I stumbled right into the technology space. While I may have been exposed to coding in high school, I didn't think about technology as a career, right, that I could pursue. I went on to college to be a political science major, right, and happened to land an internship through a program called Inroads that gave me a chance to work at a company called Lotus Development and IBM, where I went on to have an exciting career and spent 25 plus years in a number of different roles, in leadership. And so it is, you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the things that we just need to continue to beat the drum on, right? Which is that there are so many different opportunities and roles across every industry. There is not an industry today that is not in need of technology, right? And so you talk about wax, and I hadn't thought about that actually till you mentioned it, right? How that is changing, and it's more reliant on technology. Automotive, you can go down the list. So Sarah, let me come to you a little bit and talk about the work that you're doing. I have to imagine, Paris mentioned a little while back that, she's the only one in the room, and I know Kathy can probably speak to this as well. Oftentimes, I imagine that you're the only one in the room. What are the types of, as being a woman in this space, being in where it's not representative of, I think, the population, right, of our country as a whole. Can you talk about just kind of what are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that you've done to make sure that you stand out, right, and make sure that at the end of the day, that you're successful, right, in this space?
Yeah, I studied math in college and was often the only woman in the classroom. And that was initially an incredibly isolating experience. And there are definitely, many a meeting now, even now, where I'm the only woman in the room, and it still can sometimes feel isolating. One thing that I've discovered is that sometimes there will be, one other woman in the room. And that was definitely true in college. And it's also been true at work as well. And there are quite strong bonds, I think, that get forged when it's sort of just you and maybe one other person. And I've developed really deep relationships and lasting friendships with some of those women. And they end up being the people who really have sustained me, because sometimes you need someone who understands, like, just, to listen to you and understand what it's like to live in those shoes and be and feel the way that you're feeling in that room. Another thing that I've learned, and maybe this comes with age as well, and I sort of wish I could tell 16-year-old Sarah this, I think, but to just be comfortable with who you are. And not everyone, might love that. And you may stick out and you may ruffle feathers on occasion. I think often opinionated women ruffle feathers because they aren't because women aren't expected to be opinionated and to speak up. And I think, there's some of what I've done is really just getting accustomed with, well, I have an opinion and I have something to say and I'm going to say it. And that may ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to focus more on the people who bring me in and make me feel included and who listen to me and who amplify my voice. Those are the people I'm going to sort of latch on to and rely on and collaborate more with in my career. So that's something that I would definitely sort of advise to younger Sarah and maybe to others as well, is you don't have to listen to everyone, because not everyone necessarily, thinks that you should be in the room, but there almost always will be at least one person who does, and to maybe sort of focus there and on building that relationship. And using them to sort of help mentor and guide you. Mentors have been a lifeline essentially in my career.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, can you expand upon that a little bit, mentorship, right? And there's also, I think the importance of understanding mentorship and sponsors, right, in your career. And so can you talk a little bit about, sort of the mentorship and the impact that mentorship has had, as well as having sponsors?
Definitely. So a mentor, I think, at least for me, has always been someone who doesn't have a horse in the race when it comes to your success in your career. So often a sponsor is going to try and help get you to sort of a next level or a next career, or maybe you're working for someone and they want to help you get promoted. But a mentor to me has always really been someone who, they don't care if maybe you're working for them, but they won't care if you leave their lab or, their company. They really care about what you want and what you see as the next step in your career. And so mentors have been, particularly critical, I would say, to my success, because you need, agnostic, unbiased advice sometimes with someone who's not going to say, well, I really want you to stay here, so I'm going to give you advice that gets you to stay here. You want advice from someone who just wants you to thrive and be, what makes you the most happy, or what you really want to grow into. So that, I would say, has been incredibly helpful, and what I look for specifically in a mentor. Does that answer your question, Gary?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think it's really important to, help, I think those in the audience understand the importance of mentorship and sponsorship to being successful. I think particularly in this space, again, where many of us, on this panel would fall into that underrepresented bucket, right? So Kathy, I'll turn to you for a second, right? And so when you and I spoke, prior to this, I said, I've traveled. Been in this space a long time, walking in rooms with a lot of CIOs. Not many CIOs look like you, Kathy, right? So you're one of the few, right, in this space, and that's absolutely an outstanding accomplishment, because I imagine it comes through. There's a lot of adversity, right? That actually came with where you are today, and so can you talk a little bit about what are some of those things? What are some of those barriers that you found yourself having to sort of, break through in order to be able to ascend, right, to a leadership role as you currently have today?
Yeah, so I think the good news is things are a little better today, although if you look for a stat on Black female CIOs, I don't even think there's a statistic that exists, although fortunately for me, I do know a few. We've connected just by some strange ways, because we're not everywhere. Yeah, I mean, and I hate to just say it like this. Most of the time, I didn't know if it was because I was a female or because I was a person of color, but there were many situations where it was clear that folks didn't think you belonged there. I mean, the reality is that a lot of roles, not just IT roles, not just CIO roles, there is an expectation that the person taking on that role historically looks a certain way. So the bar was always way up here for me, right? So whenever I took a role, I needed to make sure that, I always had this proving period, I felt, where there was an assumption, and even I was told one time there was an assumption I got roles because they were trying to check a box, right? Which meant I needed to not only show that I wasn't there to check a box, that I really knew what I was doing and that I was more than qualified to do the job. I think when we met, I shared that purple frog story that I share sometimes, where when I was at a conference, and I didn't tell you the beginning of that story, this was probably the worst one, but there's several. And we were at a conference, and it was a utility conference for CIOs. So you've got a double whammy there, right? There's no women and people of color. There's more people of color, but not a lot of women in utility industry. And then you've got the CIO piece, right? So literally, I was one of two females. There were over 400 people at this conference. Wow. There was maybe 2 or 3 females. There were several people of color. So I sat at this table, and there was a gentleman to my right, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you a CIO?" And I said, I wanted to say my flippant, well, why else would I be sitting here? But I said, yes, I am. His first statement was, oh, I thought you were part of the event planners and stuff, you know, the girls running around, you know, helping us to find places. That's great. And that's when he said, as I shared with you, he looked at me and he said, well, aren't you like a purple frog? And not knowing what he even meant by that, he said, it's something that's rare and hardly ever seen. So, and then he turned around and started listening to the keynote. The entertaining part for me a little bit though was the CIO from Kingston, Jamaica was next to me. And he leaned over to me and he said, why don't you and I change seats so I can have a conversation with the gentleman to your right? And so, you know, it's kind of what Sarah said. There were still, you know, I had that support in the room who happened to hear the conversation. And I have found, I haven't been fortunate to have mentors as I was coming up in my career. And I always tell everyone, get a mentor, get a mentor. I know what it's like to not have one. But I was fortunate enough to have people who knew my situation and still gave me support. So I worked for a CIO before I became a CIO. She's actually the one who recommended me for my first CIO role. But she was very supportive. I was a single mom, so she was very supportive in allowing me to work and be flexible with my two kids. The CEO, you know, the previous CEO at Eversource, he will forever be one of my favorite people. He was the one who sat in the executive meetings and said, I think Kathy was talking, can we let her finish, get to the end of her sentence? So, you know, I've had those advocates, those folks who were at least there and saying, I see what's happening and I'm shutting it down, or I'm going to help and support you so you are successful. So it hasn't been easy. There's been many times I wanted to quit, but I think most of the time I just got so angry. I was like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, you know, and thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, it's just important for us to note that, you know, this isn't sort of a bed of roses, so to speak, right? There are going to be challenges. There's challenges in any job, right? But as we said at the beginning, you know, there are the numbers are getting better, right? We are seeing more and more women. We're seeing more and more people of color. Thanks to the work that Paris and all of you are doing, right, in terms of trying to diversify this space. But it's also a rewarding space. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the rewards, right? So there's adversity, right? But there are rewards that come along with being in this particular space. And so, you know, maybe Paris, I'll start with you, and then, you know, Sarah, and then Kathy, just kind of talk a little bit about some of the rewards that you've gotten from being in this space. You know, Paris, you've been in it probably a little bit shorter than probably, you know, some of us on this call here, right? But there are some rewards. And so when you talk to students and when you talk to folks that are thinking about careers and opportunities in this space, what are some of the things that you found to be, you know, rewarding that you tend to share with the folks that you meet with?
So I let everyone, so when you get into tech, I obviously always share like your salary increases, like that's really great. That can be life-changing for a lot of people. So that's definitely number one. The other thing that's rewarding is that I think like you can find a community within the industry. So like for me, I have the Black Tech Twitter community on Twitter where we even gather in person, and there's conferences around Black Tech Twitter now where we gather a few times a year. That's really rewarding because not only, you know, do you have this community online, but you can see them in person. You're networking with people who look like you. There's more representation. And I think even doing things like speaking at conferences and, you know, I think it's like taking your outside passion, something that maybe isn't like technology centric, but bringing it into this industry and knowing that, you know, it can become something big because you're using technology. You know, I love bringing people in who didn't think like, I don't think this is the right industry for me. I think like, I just wouldn't fit in here. And it's like, no, you would. You can literally take something, you know, that has nothing to do with tech and bring it in here and sort of build tech around it. And it allows you to like, it gives you so much more opportunity because again, you have like a wider audience, you're reaching people that weren't accessible at first. Like there's just so much potential within this industry and it's so rewarding. And there are even rewards I may not know exist because I haven't gotten there yet, but like the potential of being in this industry is was amazing.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Sarah?
I first want to say Paris and I work in completely different jobs, and I'm nodding vigorously to everything that she says. Like everything she said has translated over to my experience as well, even though it's been a completely separate experience. So I just wanted to note that. The things that I will add on are, one is I've always been a puzzle person, and when an experiment works and like the puzzle fits together, it's a double whammy for me, because I know it's an experiment where we're working towards this very long-term, very lofty goal of finding a medicine that will have real and true impact on people and their families. So when something starts to work, and I've cracked something that I didn't think I could really do before, and then B, it's contributing to this really long-term vision of having real impact on people who are sick, I sometimes start to kind of bounce in my chair like, oh my God, this is like really working, and the data is really doing what I thought it would do, and we didn't think this would work. And it's so satisfying because it's driving us like one step closer to this really ambitious goal. And that's a satisfaction. I mean, I've been doing this for at least 10 years. That is a satisfaction that has not tapered off at all since I started, and I don't think it will anytime soon. And then the other is I am astounded at the opportunity that has been presented to me in terms of pivoting in my career. Like when I came to Vertex, I really was kind of mind blown at just how complex drug discovery is and how many different places we have people working in tech and in science. I mean, we have lawyers who are science gurus, and we have people who are engineers because they're building machinery for us to do experiments that literally no one else in the world is doing. And we have people who are masterminds of chemists. And I didn't know that computational chemistry is a thing, but it is. And I could go on and on and on and on. There are probably 200 different job titles I could list within Vertex that I literally had no idea were STEM opportunities and tech opportunities until I was in this space. And just so the diversity of roles and careers that you can take on once you've sort of gotten in the door, as it were, is really, it continues to impress me actually, that there are even more jobs than I could have possibly imagined just by sort of venturing into the tech and science space.
Awesome. Computational chemist. I have got to write that one down.
I had no idea. Yeah, it's a thing.
I knew that was a thing. Kathy, just talk about some of the rewards on your side.
Yeah, everything that Sarah and Paris said resonates with me too. I think even, the piece about, you would think as a utility, the rewards are probably not something that would stand out, but I know that a lot of times especially when we had storms, there was such a recognition for me about how it was an impact to health and safety, and just having my own parents who were in the dark sometimes and freezing and having to go to a hotel. And I would sit there and say, we can't underestimate, even though we know it's important, it's easy to just take it for granted. But the fact that we have lights on and gas flowing is like, this is really important. So when we would get, some of the most rewarding pieces for me were when we built technology that made us able to keep the lights on, gas flowing safely better, because we did work on things that made that better, more stable. And when we would sit from the cybersecurity side. So we were, the utility industry, I don't know if folks know, it's just constantly under attack. There's nation states, and I don't mean to scare people, but there's nation states, right, who are trying to make Boston go dark. And we would spend a lot of time on the cybersecurity side and putting in the technology and the hardening and getting the skills. And I mean, it was almost a full-time job in itself. And things could happen at any time of the day, 7 days a week.
Right.
But it was so rewarding when we would thwart off those attacks, and because we would see them come and we would all cheer at the end because we're like, yeah, they didn't shut the lights off this time. Nice try, bad guys. And it would be times like Christmas Eve, and be pulled away from the dinner table, and it's like, we got something going on. It's like, okay, well, we got to focus on this. We can't have people's holidays interrupted. So I did, even though it was scary, and my blood pressure would go up, when it all went away and we knew we did it, it was because what we did, it was just I can't even express the reward on that other side, that no one knew any of that was happening.
So Kathy, I'll share a story with you and it'll be really quick here. So, but, I work in the cybersecurity space, and it was a couple of Christmases ago, several years back, the Sony attack, it was a DDoS attack, denial of service attack, where unfortunately, anyone that was looking to get onto their gaming consoles, right, were prevented, right, from being able to use their PlayStations as a result. And I think at the time, my 14-year-old looked at me and said, "What have you been doing? Because clearly it's not working," right? So the bad guys are preventing me from being able to enjoy my PlayStation during the holidays, right? So yeah. So I was a failure, right? Because I did not thwart off the bad guys on Christmas. So so let's do this. I know we're coming close to the end of time here. I don't think that we received any questions from the audience. Just if there are any questions that are out there, love to take a question or two from the audience. And while we wait for a question to come in, Kathy and Sarah and Paris, we'll just kind of, maybe just any sort of, kind of final thoughts that you may have. I'll start with you first, Paris, and then I'll move to Sarah, and then Kathy will give you, maybe the last word here. But as we wait for, just see if there are any questions come in, just any final thoughts that you may have that you may want to share with our students who, again, are contemplating pursuing a career in this particular space. I'll say before, Paris, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll say you guys have been absolutely outstanding. So thank you very much. And I think these are always great because you make it personal, right? And I think, I don't know if it was, Paris has got a lot of wisdom in her, although she's just kind of on this, and I'm envious, right? Because she's on this early track, right, of a career. But the wonderful thing about it is, and Sarah, I think, you may have said, it's just be your authentic self, right? No matter what. And I found that works. And then all of you have been just absolutely authentic. And so thank you for that. So looks like we've got one or two questions have come in. Any advice on the best way to find a job at a startup? Anyone want to take that?
I would say, there's so many job boards. There's my job board, there's Black Tech Pipeline's job board that you can look at. We work with startups too. I really want to tell people to get on Twitter. Like the tech community on Twitter is massive and it's amazing, and you can get a job straight from tweeting. It's happened to so many people. So you learn a lot, you get to network with people. And I just think like getting on Twitter, getting involved with the tech community on there, you can just use a hashtag called tech if you want, hashtag Black Tech Twitter, whatever you like. But it'll kind of introduce you to the tech industry on Twitter. You make those connections, you will learn about those resources and where to go to find jobs at startups or wherever you like to work. So definitely get on Twitter specifically.
Super. All right, so let's just as a wrap up here. Any final thoughts? Paris, we'll go to you, Sarah, and then over to Kathy.
Two random things. Number one, if you want to get into tech, please research all of the different roles. I became a software engineer because that's all I knew that existed. Had I known that being a designer was something I could do, I probably would have gone for that. So please just research the roles out there and how to get into them. Number two is please always try something yourself first before you ask for help, because it just allows you to really understand how to ask better questions. So an example of that is, instead of asking someone, how do I get into tech? First, try to Google it yourself and see what you come up with. And then you can form better questions around that when you reach out to an individual who probably has, better answers for you. So just try it yourself first.
Super, thank you for that.
I would add don't panic if it doesn't seem like everything's going smoothly. I always thought when I was younger, like I would look at people's careers and they seemed so planned and so linear. And then in my own career, everything's been very zigzaggy and some things have been accidental. I didn't like biology when I studied it in college, and now I'm a computational biologist. I didn't like working in the wet lab. You know, there are things that just, I think people's careers often from the outside seem polished and sort of like they were, every step was planned, but I think the reality is a lot messier. I think almost everyone's reality is a lot messier. So don't worry if you stumble or if things don't seem like they're going quite in the same trajectory as everyone else is. If you love something and you're passionate about it, I think eventually you'll end up where you want to be. And it may not be elegant, but that's all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on a little bit of what Sarah and Paris have already said. So first of all, try to be, I think I mentioned earlier that some of the most successful folks are the ones that come with a level of energy. And that energy means just what Paris said. Go out, do your research, figure out, what questions you want to ask by trial and error. There's so much out there. Just go explore. Most of the jobs that I got in my career, and this was before Twitter, okay, I keep dating myself, and community and social media, was through people, calling and saying, hey, check out Kathy, or Kathy, this is happening. So I think, as Paris said, with all of the communication channels that you can leverage, you can not only learn, but you just connect with people. I literally had someone who goes to the gym with a young person starting off in tech, and he said, "Hey, Kathy, this person starting off, can I send him his resume and blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera." So, but good story. He's just got a new job, right? Because I was able to connect him with a few people. It's so important, that network, that connection. Make sure you do that, but make sure you come with some background, some knowledge that you've done on your own.
Awesome. All right, we're at the end of our session. I again want to thank the Boston Private Industry Council for organizing and convening this terrific panel. Sarah, Paris, Kathy, outstanding. There are a couple of things here in the chat. Inspiring panel, right? I think it's really terrific to have you just talk a bit about the opportunity, not just the opportunities, but your own personal journeys, right? I think anytime that you can personalize it, it resonates a bit more, particularly with our younger people. So again, on behalf of the folks in the audience and team, I just really want to say thank you for being part of this event today. And looking forward to maybe continuing dialogue. If there are any additional questions that are out there that you may think of afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I add this last comment. LinkedIn. I think I'd probably say that everyone on here uses LinkedIn. And so if you're a student and you're thinking about pursuing an opportunity in tech, you can reach out to any one of us, right? But it's also important to make sure that you have a presence there, because that's generally where most of us will tend to operate. All right. Lauren, I can close it out here. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Rest of your day. Bye-bye.